Our family's legacy was everything to me. I had spent my entire life building on what my father and his father before him had created. My father was not just a parent, he was my mentor, my closest friend. We had a bond that ran deeper than words. The family business, a respected name in the city, was my world. Every decision, every expansion had my full dedication. I knew its history, its values, and its future. My father trusted me implicitly with its operations and strategic direction. Then Evelyn came into our lives. She was beautiful, charismatic, and seemed to captivate my father instantly. He was vulnerable after my mother's passing. I tried to be open-minded, but a quiet alarm bell rang deep inside me. Something felt off. Their wedding was a grand affair. My father looked genuinely happy. I wanted to share in his joy, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Her smiles felt too perfect, her attention to my father almost too intense. It was a performance, I suspected. After the wedding, Evelyn began to subtly shift our family dynamics, small changes at first. She rearranged furniture, suggested new household staff, and started managing my father's social calendar. It was always presented as making his life easier. My father, once decisive, started making small, uncharacteristic decisions without consulting me. He dismissed my questions with a wave of his hand, calling me overprotective. It was a new tone from him, one I hadn't heard before. Evelyn's subtle comments began. She would mention my intense focus on business to my father, implying I neglected him, or she'd joke about my controlling nature regarding family affairs. These words, light as they seemed, were carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt. Then came a more significant change. My father decided to restructure a key part of the family investment portfolio, a decision he had always discussed with me. He presented it as a fait accompli, citing Evelyn's sharp financial insights. I tried to speak to him directly to express my concerns about the rapid changes. He looked at me with a new, guarded expression. He said I was being difficult, that I needed to trust his judgment and accept Evelyn. The emotional distance was palpable. The man who once shared every thought with me now held a part of himself back. Our long talks became shorter. His eyes, once full of shared understanding, now held a new, cold look. I saw the pattern forming. This was a calculated dismantling. I would ensure justice. My phone calls to father began to go straight to voicemail. Evelyn always called me back, saying he was resting or unavailable. It was a new pattern. I used to speak with him daily, sometimes several times a day. I went to the house unannounced one afternoon. Evelyn met me at the door. She told me father had a packed schedule and couldn't be disturbed. Her smile was too wide, too practiced. I felt a chill. I noticed father's personal assistant, Sarah, seemed more stressed. She used to manage his calendar, but now Evelyn signed off on everything. Sarah's eyes avoided mine. It was clear who held the power now. A major decision about the old manufacturing plant came up. Father always included me in these talks. This time I heard about it after the fact. Evelyn explained it was a private discussion between her and father. My input was not needed. I saw father at a charity event. He looked tired, his movements slower. He used to be so vibrant. He seemed distant, his gaze unfocused. I wondered if he was just getting older or if something else was happening. It wasn't just age. I started seeing a pattern. After spending time with Evelyn, father often seemed more withdrawn. He became less interested in things he once loved. Her influence felt like a slow poison draining his spirit. Our monthly business review, a tradition for decades, was suddenly canceled. Evelyn said father needed more rest. She suggested a new, less frequent schedule. It was another piece of our shared history she was erasing. I tried to talk to father about the business, about the changes. I spoke calmly, logically. He cut me off. Evelyn handles these things now, he said. His voice was flat, his eyes cold. It was like speaking to a stranger. My initial doubts solidified into a grim certainty. This was no accident. Evelyn was systematically isolating father, dismantling our bond. Her actions were deliberate, calculated. I saw the blueprint of her treachery. I knew I couldn't confront her directly. It would only push father further away. I needed evidence. I would start documenting everything, every canceled meeting, every strange interaction. This was not just about me, it was about justice for father. This was my strategic move. The legal envelope sat on my desk. Its official seal felt heavy even before I opened it. This was not a usual business letter. I knew what it held, a chilling confirmation of my fears. My hand trembled slightly as I tore it open. The words blurred at first, then sharpened into devastating clarity. My father had changed his will. I was formally disinherited from the family estate and the business. The legacy I had built was gone, erased with a signature. It was a complete shock. A cold dread settled in my stomach. This was not just about money. It was about my father's trust, his love, our shared history. Evelyn had done it. She had finally achieved her goal. I had to speak to him to understand this unthinkable betrayal. I went to the house. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken tension. Father sat in his study, Evelyn by his side. Her smile was thin, almost triumphant. My father looked at me, his eyes distant, as if I were a stranger in his home. I asked him about the will, about our years of work together. To my loyalty, he dismissed it all with a wave of his hand. Evelyn has clarified things for me, he said. This is the proper course. His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. My heart ached. The man I knew, my mentor, my father, was gone, replaced by this distant figure echoing Evelyn's words. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. It was the shattering of our bond, the destruction of his trust and affection for me. I felt truly devastated. I saw the full picture then. This was no impulsive act. This was a meticulously planned corporate coup. Evelyn had orchestrated every step, from isolating him to poisoning his mind. She had played a long game and she had won this round. Her treachery was absolute. Every subtle comment, every canceled meeting, every shift in his behavior now made perfect sense. She had systematically dismantled my relationship with him. She had prepared the ground for this legal maneuver. It was cold, precise, and utterly ruthless. The devastation slowly morphed into a burning resolve. I would not let her succeed. I would expose her calculated treachery. I would reclaim my family's honor, my legacy, and ensure justice for my father. This was my unwavering vow. I understood now. This was not the end, it was the beginning of a relentless battle. I would not allow her to erase me from our family's history. My strategic planning would now focus on her downfall and the restoration of what was rightfully ours. The fight had officially begun. The shock of the will faded, replaced by cold resolve. I knew I had to act. This was a strategic challenge, not an emotional defeat. I began to plan my investigation methodically. My first step was to discreetly research Evelyn's past. I needed to understand her history, her connections, and any previous patterns. Every detail could be a crucial piece of the puzzle. I started with public records and online databases. I also examined the specific timing and wording of my father's new will. There had to be a legal vulnerability, a loophole she exploited. I looked for anything unusual in the document. This was a calculated legal maneuver. As I pieced information together, a clear pattern emerged. Her actions were not random. This was a carefully orchestrated plan, executed with precision. My suspicions of premeditated manipulation grew stronger. My initial inquiries into Evelyn's background started to reveal alarming inconsistencies. Dates didn't quite match. Some employment records seemed vague. These small details raised significant red flags. I found vague references to similar situations in her past, distant connections that hinted at a pattern. It was not concrete proof yet, but it suggested a history of predatory behavior. I needed to dig deeper. The time came to seek expert guidance. I thought of Mr. Henderson, a retired family lawyer. He knew our family's history and values. I knew he would understand the gravity of the situation. Mr. Henderson listened intently to my findings. He seemed hesitant at first, understanding the delicacy, but his deep loyalty to my father and our family ultimately convinced him. He agreed to provide confidential guidance. With Mr. Henderson's advice, I focused my investigation. I looked into specific financial records related to my father's accounts. Then I found it. A suspicious transaction, a large sum moved to an unfamiliar offshore account. This transaction was a crucial lead, hinting at the true depth of Evelyn's calculated strategy. It was more than just the will, it was a broader financial maneuver. This was the first undeniable piece of evidence. This discovery fueled my resolve for justice. I reviewed my notes on father's behavior. The shift was subtle at first, then more pronounced. Evelyn's influence was a constant, quiet pressure. I documented every instance, every change in his routine or opinion. This was evidence of undue influence carefully compiled. Next, I turned to the family business's financial records. Accessing them required discretion. I focused on recent transactions, looking for anything unusual. My father had always been meticulous. Any deviation would stand out clearly. I knew where to look for anomalies. My suspicion was that Evelyn's reach extended beyond the will. She likely targeted corporate assets too. I cross-referenced company expenditures with her personal travel and purchases. It was a tedious process but necessary. Every detail could reveal a pattern of misdirection. I needed allies within the company. I reached out to Sarah, father's long-term assistant. She was loyal and discreet. We met for coffee away from the office. Her initial reluctance faded as I explained my concerns for father. She quietly agreed to help. Sarah provided critical insights. She mentioned Evelyn's insistence on approving all invoices, especially for consulting fees. She also noted strange requests for old, archived files. These were not typical procedures. Her information was invaluable for my investigation. My external research into Evelyn's past continued. I found a public record, a small news article from years ago about a similar inheritance dispute in another state. The details were vague, but the name Evelyn and the circumstances were strikingly similar. It sent a chill through me. This discovery was chilling. It confirmed my worst fears. Evelyn was not just an opportunistic individual. She was a professional opportunist with a history of such actions. This was her modus operandi. The pieces of her predatory past were beginning to align. I identified a clear pattern of financial misconduct. Funds were being routed through shell corporations, then disappearing. These were not legitimate business expenses. This was a deliberate scheme to divert company assets. I meticulously documented every transaction. Laying the groundwork for a legal challenge was my priority. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every financial discrepancy needed to be irrefutable. Mr. Henderson reviewed my findings. He nodded slowly, a somber look on his face. The case was strong. My investigation culminated in a dossier of overwhelming evidence. It detailed Evelyn's psychological abuse, the undue influence, and the systematic financial manipulation. This was not just about reclaiming my inheritance. It was about exposing her complete ruin of my family's legacy. The time for professional consequences was drawing near. My legal team initiated the formal challenge. The paperwork landed on Evelyn's desk outlining our grounds. It marked the official start of our professional engagement. I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing the process had begun. We cited undue influence and father's diminished capacity. The evidence from my compiled dossier was compelling. This was not a personal attack but a legal assertion of truth. The facts were on our side, meticulously laid out. Simultaneously, I launched a comprehensive forensic audit of the family business. Every financial record would be scrutinized. No transaction would go unnoticed by the expert team I had assembled. The timing was crucial. The audit would intensify pressure, showing Evelyn that her control was slipping. It was a strategic one-two punch, designed to expose her financial manipulations. Every move was calculated. Evelyn's initial reaction was feigned indifference. She carried herself with false confidence as always, but I saw a flicker of concern in her eyes when she heard about the audit. The cracks were starting to show in her facade. As the legal and financial investigations tightened, her composure began to fray. I heard reports of her demanding answers, her voice sharp. Her frustration was becoming palpable to those around her. She was losing control. I leveraged my network, reaching out to contacts in the media, not for sensationalism, but for ethical exposure. We framed it as a matter of corporate governance and family legacy protection. It was a subtle yet effective strategy. The narrative focused on the vulnerability of an aging patriarch. It highlighted the importance of protecting family businesses from exploitation. The public discussion was carefully managed, yet impactful in raising awareness. Then came the court order. It was a significant legal development, a true turning point. The judge's ruling severely restricted her control over specific family assets. This was a major blow to her financial power. Evelyn's ability to move funds was now severely limited. Her empire, built on deceit, was beginning to crumble under the weight of accountability. This was not the end, but a decisive turning point. The next steps would ensure her complete downfall. The courtroom felt hushed. I watched Evelyn as the proceedings began. Her usual composure seemed to waver slightly. This was the moment we had prepared for, the beginning of her accountability. I felt a quiet resolve. My legal team began presenting our comprehensive dossier. Each piece of evidence was laid out with precision. The documents detailed her systematic isolation of my father. It was a methodical dismantling of her narrative. We showed how Evelyn had manipulated my father's decisions. The subtle shifts in his behavior were now clear. Her calculated comments, her control over his schedule, all pointed to undue influence. The truth was becoming undeniable. Sarah, my father's former assistant, took the stand. She spoke calmly about Evelyn's unusual demands. Her testimony highlighted Evelyn's control over father's life. It painted a clear picture of isolation. Her words resonated with quiet authority. Next, the forensic financial experts presented their findings. They detailed the diverted funds, the shell corporations, and the suspicious transactions. The numbers spoke for themselves. Evelyn's financial impropriety was now undeniable. We then revealed Evelyn's past. The pattern of similar situations in other states became clear. This was not an isolated incident. It was her established method of operation. Her predatory history was exposed for all to see. Outside the courtroom, media attention grew significantly. News reports highlighted the proceedings. Evelyn's carefully constructed public image began to crumble. The truth was now reaching a wider audience. Evelyn's legal team tried to counter our evidence. They attempted to discredit witnesses to deflect blame, but their arguments lacked substance. The facts we presented were too strong, too well documented. Their efforts were futile. The judge listened intently, reviewing all the presented evidence. It was clear the court recognized the depth of Evelyn's calculated treachery. Her attempts to escape accountability were failing. The path to justice was now clear. The judge delivered the ruling. The court found in our favor. Evelyn's actions constituted undue influence and financial misconduct. This judgment marked the beginning of the dismantling of her ill-gotten empire. Justice was finally being served. The legal battle concluded. The court's final decree landed on my desk. It confirmed the full restoration of my rightful inheritance and complete control over the family business. It was a moment of quiet vindication. I immediately commenced the vital process of recovery. My team and I began strategic restructuring. We needed to stabilize the company and rebuild its foundational strength. This was the first step in a long, deliberate journey. The true extent of Evelyn's financial damage was meticulously assessed. Her diversions and misallocations were significant. It was a stark reminder of her calculated treachery. We had to understand the full scope to heal. I implemented robust strategies to rebuild and strengthen our family's enduring legacy. This included new investment protocols and enhanced oversight. Our future stability was my paramount concern. We would ensure resilience. Addressing the deep emotional wounds was necessary. I reflected on the tragic loss of my bond with my father. The pain was still present, but clarity had emerged. I began to find a fragile peace. I understood now that my father was Evelyn's ultimate victim. His trust had been exploited, his mind manipulated. This realization allowed me to forgive not her but the circumstances that had stolen him from me. It brought a quiet closure. I established comprehensive new safeguards within the family enterprise. These were designed to protect against any future exploitation. Transparency and accountability became the cornerstones of our operations. We would not be vulnerable again. Stringent ethical frameworks were implemented across all levels. Every decision would now pass through rigorous scrutiny. This meticulous approach was vital to prevent any undue influence or manipulation. Our integrity was paramount. With justice decisively served, my family's honor was fully restored. The public exposure of Evelyn's actions ensured her complete downfall. I felt a calm satisfaction, a deep vindication. The truth had prevailed. I dedicated myself to nurturing a future built on unwavering integrity, resilience, and a revitalized family legacy. This was my testament, a lasting tribute to my father and our name. Evelyn was a footnote, our legacy endured. I had the last word.